Hello and welcome to SpyHards podcast. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur.
And we are here continuing our journey into 2023's Ghosted, the Ana de Armas, Chris Evans comedy spy film. But we have a very special guest joining us, Cam.
Yes, we are joined by Garrett Warren, who was the second unit director and stunt coordinator on Ghosted, and has also worked in the past on films like Avatar 1 and 2, Logan, Mission Impossible 3, Real Steel, and so much more.
Yes, quite the filmography, this man. But we're here to talk about Ghosted, and we're going to sneak in a few other spy movie questions. Don't you worry, folks. So without further ado, let's get back to the Ghosted fun. And joining us now on the show, a man that is responsible for films like Avatar, Logan, Alice in Wonderland, Real Steel, Alita Battle Angel, and he's here today to discuss one of his most recent films, Ghosted. Its second unit director and stunt coordinator extraordinaire, Mr. Garrett Warren. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm doing really well, thanks. What a great introduction, man. Thank you so much.
Well earned and well deserved. And there's plenty more accolades where that came from. And there's actually a lot of spy movies in your back catalogue that one day I think we'll get into. But I know your time is short with us today, so I think we're going to jump right into the film we're talking about this week, which is Ghosted.
Great.
The first question I have is really, how did that project come to you? How did you first learn about Ghosted, and sort of what interested you about the film?
First of all, the director interests me. His name is Dexter Fletcher. He's an amazing man. I can't tell you how he's one of my most favorite people to work with. He's so much fun, and he's one of the most gifted directors out there. He was an actor at first. I'm sure you guys know who Dexter Fletcher was. Did Rocket Man, Bohemian Rhapsody, blah, blah, blah. But when I got the call from my agent, who said that they were looking for a director on this project, I didn't know much about him except that he was an actor on all of those other movies like Lock, Stock, and whatnot, So I did research a little bit more and go, oh, wow, he did do Bohemian Rhapsody and everything. So when I met him, I did have a little homework under my belt. I did know what I was talking about when I said hi to him. And he did such an amazing job in the meeting. He was so smiley and happy and warm and inviting. And that is exactly one of the things that you always look for when you're someone in my shoes. And then on top of that, someone who's going to get great performances and have great ideas. And he pretty much just talked through the meeting and said, all right, I've got these ideas, and, this is what we're going to try and go for. And that's what made it so special to me.
One thing I've noticed talking to people who've worked in second unit and stunt coordination is that there's often kind of a split between the director and the second unit, where, say, Bond films, the second unit is off doing the action and the director really doesn't step into that. Whereas when I was doing research on Ghosted, I noticed, Dexter Fletcher talking a lot about, for example, the bus sequence and how important that action scene was to him. I'm just curious how the dynamic worked between the two of you when it came to, like, action sequences.
Well, I went off to shoot most of the driving stuff on a second unit. But let me say that we had prepped it, Dexter and myself. First of all, we went and scouted it together. He came on the scouts with me. He said this would be a great spot, right? He chose the spots that he liked all the things to happen at. He would ask my advice, of course, on what good stunt we could do and what would be something that we should overlook. Then on top of all of that, we went back to the drawing board, back at the stages, and we did, an animated previs with the VFX team. So we knew exactly what shots we wanted to do before we had done them. And basically, Dexter had already given me the roadmap and said, all right, if you shoot this, then you've got my bus chase. So I really can't take the credit for conceiving, the action you guys saw in front of you, but I can take the credit for executing the action you saw, and some of the things that were difficult for him to grasp, like making the bus do the 180 spin, and all that kind of stuff. He wasn't exactly sure how to do that. And I've been fortunate enough to come up with a number of movies that think outside the box. You mentioned one like Alice in Wonderland, Avatar. Those things have gifted me with the ability to think of how to achieve shots that might be incomprehensible, but still make them look like they possibly could be done. So I come up with those things. Those are the things that I create. And I say, don't worry, I've got this, and I'm going to do it this way. Then he signs off on it. We do. I think one of the fun things about my second unit was every time I did a shot, within 3 to 5 minutes of doing the shot, I cut it together and put it into the previs that we had, so that every time I did a shot, we updated the previs. I would send it off to Dexter just off of my iPhone real quickly. I'd send it off to him saying, what do you think? And he'd say, fantastic, that's amazing. And then another one, and then another one. And by the end of the day, we have a big chunk of that previs already filled in. And it was basically like just filling in a puzzle. And that's how we did the bus sequence.
Wow. And just sort of like transplanting, because the two big sequences in terms of action in that film for me is the bus and the sort of revolving restaurant. And we are speaking about Ghosted this week, and immediately when I finished watching the film, I sent you an email just saying I love what you did. And I've never had that experience before, where I've been so moved by action in a film that I thought, I'm going to track down the man responsible for making that happen. I'm going to drag him kicking and screaming onto SpyHards to talk about it. So I mean, credit to you for making it mean something, because we look at a lot of spy action films on the show, but I feel like you really brought a different energy to those sequences, and they really do stand out in the film.
Thank you so much. That's really nice of you to say, because that really is the goal behind the action that I do. I don't do action just for action's sake or just for trailer moments. I really do try to make sure that it's character driven or story driven, and that it means something. And if I get an audience member to grip the edge of their seat, to be worried or scared or happy, then I've done my job. But if people are just watching, action for action's sake, then I always, go back to the drawing board and say to myself, you've got to not do that. You've got to do something that's going to tie in the audience to the emotional part of the story. So thank you, man. I really do appreciate that greatly.
I would love to know, when it comes to staging action in a comedy, because you worked on Spy as well, like, what is the secret to pulling that off? Because you want it to be exhilarating and involving, but at the same time, there has to be like a light tone so the audience feels like they're having fun. Like, what goes into the thinking behind that?
Well, you shoot the action in a comedy. You shoot the action as serious as you possibly can. You really do. You just say to yourself, design a sequence that's real. Have a guy come after her, choke her, and then you say to yourself, okay, what are the things that you could grab in this location? What are the things that this person is going to use in this location? And then you go ahead and you first think along the lines of what is serious and what is real. And then you also think along the lines of, okay, what is a little ridiculous? Then you think along the lines of, all right, what else could I do here? You take those three versions and you kind of bake them off to yourself, to the director, and to the actors. And everyone gets to go, oh, no, this is funny. This is great. And for me, I don't try to shoot comedy. I try to shoot and let the actors be funny. And if you do that, then, the funny will find itself and you won't force it. And that's, to me, the most important thing when it comes to comedy.
And I had kind of a follow-up to that. You have the Chris Evans character in this movie who is not trained as an agent. And I'm curious about coordinating and choreographing action when you have someone who, in theory, is not supposed to be able to know how to fight.
Well, don't forget now, if you realize that he was all-state wrestler,
True.
where he grew in. So that's what we did. We swung to those strengths. We said, okay, he's not a great fighter, but what he does know is how to wrestle someone, so he's going to grab someone and pick him up and do a slam, which is what all the wrestlers do. My right-hand man is a guy named Steve Brown. He's amazing. And he was all-American wrestler. And he's amazing at it. So when it came time to do the fight, he's like, oh, I got this. This is great. And trust me, anytime I mess around with him and fight him, he's always like shooting for a single or shooting to grab me to do a double or something like that. So it's like, it was a no-brainer. It was super easy to do that. And then Chris is already a funny guy. He has this natural acclamation to be doing funny things, so he brings the funny. He's like, look, I don't want to do that here. What I want to do is this here. I want to use a napkin here and think that that's going to, stop him or whatever it is. And, you let those guys vamp, you let them unleash, and you just give them the freedom. And that's the easy part. My job is not hard when it comes to working with actors. If you work with a great actor, you just let them act. My job is hard when it comes to, crashing a car and making someone get hit by it for real. That's when someone can get hurt.
Well, one person we haven't mentioned just yet, who's become a little bit of a hero herself in the sort of spy action world, given from No Time to Die a couple of years ago, The Grey Man recently, and now Ghosted, is Anna de Armas, of course, who you work with in this film. Just, I mean, overall, what was it like to work with Anna, and sort of any stories about working with her on the set of Ghosted?
Here's a girl that, when we saw her in Bond, we were just like floored. We were like, yeah, nobody else is better than this. She came in and she brought the same thing to the table. She was already charismatic. If you ask me, she's one of those people that right when they come in, they feel like they've been a star for a long time. They've existed in this world and they know exactly what they want to do and how they want to do it. For her, she was rehearsing, a lot with my stunt team, Steve Brown and everyone like that. We didn't use, the double unless it was something that was really rough and really hard, like a wire slam into a wall or something like that. But she was always game to go out there and do it herself. She's very athletic. So, my hat's off to her. She did pull off an awful lot.
And I would love to just hear you talk a little bit about the rotating restaurant sequence, which is incredibly ambitious and looks like, I would imagine that one was not particularly easy to stage.
When they came to me with the rotating restaurant idea, when Dexter brought it up, 50% of the team was like, this is just too hard. We shouldn't do it. Then the other 50% is like, oh, this is interesting. No one's done it before. And, you get that other argument. No one's done it before because it's too hard to do. It's just not worth it, Then I kind of told them, well, look, growing up on the East Coast, we used to go to festivals, fairs, you know what I mean? And they would have these things called the Gravitron. I don't know if you guys know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I said, this reminds me of the Gravitron. And when I was a kid, one of the boss level moves you could do is try to stand on the wall and walk around the Gravitron like that. And when Dexter heard that, because Dexter's from across the UK, he was like, you're kidding me. And I said, no. And then in Atlanta, while we were filming, there was a fair and they had a Gravitron. So back on my Instagram story, not story, but in my Instagram posts, you'll see the R&D we did for it. I took me and Steve and some people, we went in there and we got sucked to the walls and we fought. And we tried to stand up and get on our knees and grab each other and slam people down. And I was in there trying to film it the whole time. And it was an awful lot of fun because a lot of people were, even the actors are like, well, if you were stuck to the wall, you wouldn't be able to fight. And I kept saying, no, that's not true. You can. Being a guy that's done the Gravitron walk before, you can do it. It's hard. So we did the videos, we showed everyone, and they were all like, oh my gosh, you can fight. All right. So that's how we did the research for it. Then they said, how are we going to do this? The special effects team built a turntable, right? However, the turntable wasn't the outside room. The turntable was the inside core. So you could put people on the inside core and we could step off and go, or you could have a camera right here and have someone try to run and the camera would be like this going by as well. So the inside was spinning because that we could control. The outside was going to be too difficult. We couldn't build that whole set on a stage. What we did was we built a section of the window and it was just normal. Then we built another section that was on its side like this. So gravity was going to hold you to the glass. So we shot the fight two ways. One way was on the glass upright and we would do some of the fight here. Then we do some more of the fight when it's upside down. So gravity was holding people down. And then you just have to act. You have to act like you're being held down. And that's how we did the fight. And then I would take a crane arm. And if you were here on it, I'd take the crane arm and just swing right by you like this. And it would make it look like you're going by the camera really fast. And that is how we did the rotating room fight.
Wow. Which took longer to put together, the bus sequence or the rotating restaurant?
Bus sequence.
Interesting.
The bus sequence was really detailed. The bus itself was a character. To Dexter, the bus itself had to be so special and so intricate and so wild and so fun. And I can't tell you how he really took great pride in that bus. He took great pride in the room too, but don't forget, the room was just basically a restaurant. The bus had paint and, all kinds of eclectic things on it. And so it was an awful lot of fun to see. The bus sequence was months of planning. As much as The Room was months of planning, it wasn't as detailed as far as like rehearsal and things to do, because there's only so much you can do, suck to the glass. You know, you're trying to punch someone and spin on the glass, and that wasn't too bad or too hard. At one point, you know, he had to turn it over to me, and he had to say, okay, just help finish this. And that's when, you know, the stuff comes crashing into it. And that's where my imagination comes into play. I'm saying, okay, a green screen thing is going to come in here and it's going to hit this and take it out, and it's going to look great. And even though people can't see it, I can in my mind. And that's how I did it.
And what would you say, I mean, between those, probably those are the two big sequences, like we said, what was the biggest challenge you overcame in the process of making Ghosted from your point of view in the production?
Ooh. You know what? I think the biggest challenge was the rotating room, because a lot of people had a hard time grasping that idea. So that is the hardest challenge that we were faced. We had to, you know, we had to think about budget, about how much of the stage we could build. So we had to just figure out exactly how much we needed and how much we were going to use. And that way we wouldn't lose money or waste money. At the same token, visual effects is trying to like sound off as far as what is needed practically to touch so that they can still work within it. That is like a math equation. So when it comes to doing something like that, yeah, that's probably the hardest thing to do.
Right.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Calling all agents. Keeping the lights on at SpyHards HQ ain't cheap. And frankly, nor is feeding the school of attack piranhas. So we need your help.
Roger that, Scott. Only at the SpyHards Patreon can you gain access to exclusive shows like Agents in the Field, which tackles non-spy films starring your favorite spy icons, and The Debrief, where we channel our inner solitaires and predict how the big spy movie news of today will impact tomorrow.
So make like a Treadstone agent and activate your Patreon membership at patreon.com/SpyHards today. Cam, tell the people what we have in our sights this week.
Scott, we are returning to Kevin Costner's 1990s glory days to revisit 1992's The Bodyguard. Will we always love this movie? We will have to find out.
But before this message self-destructs, Cam, resume the spy chinks. Now, we could go further into Ghosted, but I know your time is short and you have a long list of spy movies you've worked on. So we're going to just quick shot a couple of them if you don't mind.
Go.
We'll dive in and out. The first one that jumps to my mind looking through your filmography is Mission Impossible 3.
I love that.
Going back a little bit, yeah. So what was your involvement with the film and sort of your memories of working on the set of Mission?
So I was just one of the stunt guys, one of the many bad guys that were in the sequences. I was on it for about 3 weeks. The stunt coordinator and second year director was a man named Vic Armstrong. Mm-hmm. Vic Armstrong is the greatest stunt man, aside from the Bob Browns, the Hal Needhams, the Dar Robbins. You know, those are the guys that are legends in our stunt industry who were pioneers. So was Vic Armstrong. Vic Armstrong came up with ideas way before any of us could have even fathomed them. And he was doing horse stunts that still to this day make me wonder how he didn't die. He's the one that came up with that movie, and I had worked with him doing Starship Troopers. I'd worked with him on Army of One. The man is not only a legend, but also one of the greatest filmmakers I've ever seen in my life. People like Steven Spielberg listen to his knowledge. People like, James Cameron, anybody who is big in this business knows that this man has seen an awful lot and knows an awful lot. And so that's how I got onto it. And as far as, getting killed by Tom Cruise and all that stuff, it was an awful lot of fun. It had been the third time I worked with Tom. Once again, I had done War of the Worlds. And once again, Vic Armstrong was the second year director and stunt coordinator on that. And Tom was once again on that, a true professional, an amazing actor, incredibly gifted when it comes to doing stunts and, action. Had the best time. So Mission Impossible 3 holds a special place in my heart.
And the Mission Impossible films are very well known for stunts, which is also part of your repertoire. Looking at the Mission films, just, from a personal taste, what's your sort of favorite stunt from those films so far?
Oh, man. Wrong. It's impossible. How can someone say that? Look, I love the idea that he jumped a motorcycle off a cliff. A part of me is kind of like, I don't necessarily know that I needed it in that movie because it is more like Robbie Knievel jumping a motorcycle over the fountains or something like that, you know?
Mhm.
I think that the fight on the train is more of a stunt to me. That was a great undertaking because they did build basically their own train and fight on top of it with wires on those guys. To me, that is more dangerous and hairy and harder to do. But don't forget, he is risking his life jumping a motorcycle. I do venture, though, to say that when someone's jumping a motorcycle and has a parachute on and they're jumping into a void, you know, you're basically becoming a live performer. You know what I mean? You're just doing like daredevil stunts, which is cool and awesome, but the cinematography of it really does come into the fight on top of the train. So the last movie I thought was fantastic. Him hanging out of the plane, don't get me wrong, I love it, but he is wired onto it. And it's just him holding onto a door. So it's kind of like, yeah, that's dangerous and that's wild and that's crazy. You're going up thousands of feet, but once again, you are just wired. It's his run across the building and jump the gap and try to make it and not make it. That was a harder stunt. To me, that's one of the most impressive stunts you could have done. Bigger than that, if you ask me, is the car chase he did where he was flipping the car in the tight streets, you know, with the little car and the motorcycle guys, and he was taking them out. To me, that was probably the most impressive stunts that he had ever done. I mean, he does all of that driving mostly. As much as someone else doubles him for some of the crazier things, that man is amazing when it comes to doing anything on a motorcycle, vehicle, helicopter, you name it, he's great.
Yeah, we've talked to other stuntmen and actors who've worked with Tom Cruise on action sequences, and they just all point to just his level of focus and dedication when it comes to pulling that stuff off.
I think, though, that it's, you know, I guess I can be a little bit righteous on this one. It almost is like a guilty pleasure for him. You know what I mean? It's
Sure.
like he gets paid to learn how to ride a motorcycle with a base jump parachute, and they did it for like a year beforehand. He had the top professionals. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? I mean, I know there's some people that are like, no, I would never do it. But the people that do go skydiving and ride motorcycles are like, dude, I'll do that for free. Anytime you have that outlet, and he is that guy. He's an adrenaline junkie. He is one of those kinds of people that wants to do those things, fly planes, you know, crash cars, trains, things like that. You know, I mean, he's pretty much sitting there making a Christmas list going, what have I not done? Ooh, I want to do this. And that is epic in its essence, if you ask me, but it is still selfish at the same time. It wasn't like, I really do believe that, you know, they had the story and then someone came up with the idea, maybe Tom, and he's like, oh, I've always wanted to do this. We can do this now. And he put in this glorified motorcycle jumper. He's like, this is going to be epic. And that's how I get to the plane, to the train. And a part of me is like, yeah, there couldn't have been another idea to help get you on the train than this. Okay. I mean, but God bless him. I love it. I think that if you had that money, that time, and that team, go for it, man. You know, knock your socks off, wear the clothes, do the stunt, grab the bike, you know, the parachute, and just go out there and have one of those moments in your life where you can look back going, yeah, I did that.
Definitely. And another spy film you did that I have a lot of affection for, it was one that was a favorite as a teenager, was Double Team. And I would love to know.
You sons of guns, man. Yeah, you had to find that one, didn't you?
I would love to know just about like what work you did on that film.
I doubled Jean-Claude Van Damme and Mickey Rourke on that movie. At one point, I was kind of fighting myself inside that bullfighting arena. I also doubled a number of other people on that. There's a guy by a taxi cab who gets grabbed and by Dennis Rodman and thrown over the top of the taxi cab into a bus going by, and it hits me. Dude, I was doubling Van Damme when I had to kick the wooden upright that sends the tiger into the boxes.
Yep.
Scared out of my mind, man. Oh my gosh. Do you know how close that tiger is to you? And the fact that those things can cover that distance in the blink of an eye means that you could be dead right here and now. And there's a tiger trainer right behind me. And I'm walking backwards on this like little bridge. And the trainer's like, whatever you do, just don't look the tiger in the eye. I'm like, okay, great. And I'm walking backwards, not looking at it. I'm just looking at his paws. And all of a sudden he makes this roar that shook me. And I look at his eyes and I go, I looked at his eyes. I looked at his eyes and he goes, it's okay. It's okay. He's not coming after you. And I go, oh shit, you know, and I get back and I'm not going to kick until he says, go ahead and kick. And he goes, now kick. I kicked that sucker and hoped he didn't kill me. you know, because I thought maybe he just jumped that thing and grabbed me like a toy and ripped me to shreds. Other than that, you know, the toss over the yellow taxi cab, that was a rough stunt. You know, that bus that was driving by, when I went through that side window, first of all, the side window was real glass. We blew it with explosives. It was poppers. So it was tempered glass that we popped. When I hit it, I wasn't going fast enough to get through the window. The window hit me and took me along too. And I had a cup on and it broke that cup.
Oh.
And afterwards I came away and I was black and blue down there and I was all nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, do I need to go to a hospital? We were in the south of France and there was no hospitals close to us at the time. And I was like, man. So it was a wild experience in that sense. And then fighting in the bullfighting arena with Mickey Rourke and Van Damme at that time. And we were shooting in a place called Arles, France. I don't know if you guys know where Arles, France is. Arles, France is in the middle of nowhere in the south of France. It's where, you know, I believe Van Gogh chopped his ear off, or not chopped his ear off. Maybe it was where maybe is that where he killed himself? I think it's where he killed himself. Or one of those artists was living at the time, and that's where they killed themselves. So it was a really weird and interesting kind of a vibe to be able to go and see these places and do these things on these spy movies that you're talking about. I was incredibly like young at the time. You know, I'd still been in the business long enough, but I was still kind of new at the time. And I had just come off of Starship Troopers when I had gone to do that. So this was kind of a wild experience for me. And yeah, it was interesting to be able to go and wear both hats when I was doubling people.
Wow.
Now, I feel like we're barely scratching the surface of your work, so we'll have to have a round two at some point and come back and see with some more of these spy films you've done. So I have two questions to wrap us up with, quick fire questions for you.
Go for it.
Firstly, the SAG strike has literally wrapped yesterday. It's all looking good now. Productions will resume soon. So what's on the slate for you coming up?
Well, I never stopped working. I've been here the whole time. This is Derek. Say hi to Derek.
Hi, Derek.
Derek is editing right now. See, he'll show you the edit right now.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
So if you guys remember when I told you I shoot something and put it into an edit on Ghost Edit right away, he was the guy that did it for me. He's amazingly gifted. He's a great cinematographer. He's a great director in his own right. He's a great stunt guy as well. We kind of brought him into the business, me and Steve, when we were doing these movies and taught him to do stunts and so forth. And he's been taking fight work with us and he's doing a really good job. At the moment, I wrote a script and it's at the studio level right now. I have a great producer. While I was on hiatus, aside from me writing the script, I also took the time to shoot a scene from the movie just for fun. You know, got a bunch of stunt guys together, got my friends together, pulled some favors, and said, let's shoot this whole sequence that's inside of this movie so that we can show the studio, we can show the actors, we can show everyone that this is kind of the vibe that we're going for. And that's what I have been doing. And that's what hopefully next year, you know, you'll see me transition into the director's chair, you know, the first unit chair, as well as the writer's chair. And you'll see the movie that I wrote, as well as hopefully I'll be directing it next year.
Very cool. Very cool.
Okay, well that's a promising start for 2024 by the sounds of it there. And the last question I have for you, Garrett, is, and this question has been asked everyone that's ever been on this show in terms of guests. Garrett Warren, what is your favorite spy movie of all time?
Dude, you can't do that to me, but okay. You know, oh, man, I've forgotten the name of it now, and I wish I didn't. The Robert Redford, Brad Pitt one.
Spy Game.
Yeah, I really do. I have to admit, I do love that movie. I love Brad Pitt in it. I love the setup. I love the fact that Robert Redford never leaves his office in order to work with him, but you still see flashbacks. I love the character development, the character arcs. But don't get me wrong, there are some amazing other spy movies out there, and Mission Impossible, you're amazing. Bond, you're amazing. I think that, of course, I can also say Casino Royale is one of my favorite movies of all time. Yeah. What else is Spectre. Spectre was a great film, cinematically genius. I love the cast in that. I love the ending of the movie. It's just so hard because if you ask me, those are movies on a grand scale.
Mhm.
But Spy Games was much more of an intimate story, you know? And like, if you look at Sicario 1, amazing movie. Sicario 2, also another amazing movie, but two separate movies. The first one is really intimate. The second one is a much grander scale. It's like more of a war, you know? And I kind of gravitate more towards those intimate movies at times, you know?
Mhm.
So I'm kind of stuck in that world where that one always stands out. I'll never, ever not like that movie. I mean, you can't call it a spy movie, but Insider was a great film as well that, you know, what is it? Michael Mann directed back in the day, you know, and it had Russell Crowe in it. It had
Al Pacino.
Al Pacino in it. You know, it wasn't really a spy movie, but it kind of was. You know, I gravitate towards those movies an awful lot. I really do. I think those movies really do make me go over the edge. Now, if you're talking about for fun, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, hands down. Mrs. and Mrs. Smith, spy movie, hands down, fun. Their dynamic, I dare you to find another dynamic in the history of cinema that is as genuine and awesome. The kiss that they do inside that kitchen after they fight is greatness. It goes down with Humphrey Bogart, you know, and Gone with the Wind. It goes down with the upside down Spider-Man kiss, you know, that Toby did. I can't tell you how I was so impressed with that film. Even Vince Vaughn's character, how funny he is and how real he is and the way he screams at his mom. So when you guys say what's your favorite spy movie, you have various levels. And I'm sure a lot of people told you can't ask me that. And I'm sure people gave you all those same kinds of answers. I can't pick one. I really can't. But if I had to, if you had a gun to my head, I'd go to Spy Game.
Great pick.
It's a great pick. The writer of the film is an avid listener to the show. He'll be very happy to know that you said that. Mr. Michael Frost Beckner, hello, sir, if you're listening. But as for you, Garrett, I consider this a part one. I hope there will be a part two because we have a lot more to discuss. But it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. I hope you have a wonderful day and best of luck with your film in 2024.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I really do greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well, there you go, folks. That was our chat with Mr. Garrett Warren. I want to thank him once again for taking the time to speak with us all about his extensive work in spy movies. But Cam, let's talk about it. Ghosted. It's nice to hear that he had such a close dynamic with the director on the film, and they sort of complemented each other by the sounds of it.
Yeah, from every interview I read, Dexter Fletcher was very proud of the bus sequence. And it was so fantastic to hear Garrett break it down in terms of the shooting and just how difficult it was. Like, I genuinely thought he would say the revolving restaurant sequence was the more difficult of the two, but to hear him talk about the passion that that Dexter Fletcher had for the sequence, but also just the amount of work and the amount they had to actually figure out to pull it off, I thought was really interesting to hear.
And it's one thing I think the film does really well, and I spoke about it in the review earlier this week, is these action sequences were so good that it made me send him an email that like minutes after I finished the film.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of these films can go on to streaming and just get lost. You think of something like The Grey Man, really did sort of vanish after a couple of weeks. It's these little stamps like this that make these moments stick in people's heads. And I would say if anyone sat down and watched Ghosted, I think you'd still remember that bus sequence or the revolving restaurant sequence a couple of weeks later on. That will stick with you.
Definitely.
So I'm glad that they spent a lot of time working on it because I think it shows.
Yeah, and I really was interested in hearing him talk about working with Chris Evans in particular, just like the actor playing a character who isn't necessarily trained for spycraft and how they make that work, and talking about the background and that he has a wrestling background. We got to start from there and working in wrestling moves. I thought that was really interesting to hear how he's thinking about character when it comes to these sequences, which can often be just, I think, by some regarded as more of a technical thing. But the fact that he was constantly very focused on how do we kind of tell the story of these action sequences through the character Chris Evans is playing, I thought that was just fascinating to hear.
Yeah, and kind of that answer was to your question about having action sequences in comedy spy films. It's something we also praised The Spy Who Dumped Me for, having great action sequences, and this one does too. And it seems to be the magic, sort of the recipe, as it were, is to just play it completely straight and let the sort of character come through in the moment instead of having like over the top action sequences, which you could have easily gotten away with in this film if you wanted to.
Yeah, and it's been a while since I watched Spy, which Garrett worked on as well. And my memory is that actually has pretty solid action sequences as well.
Yeah, it's one of those films that Spy, I should say, is one of those films that is often referenced to me. I haven't seen it yet. I'm just going to wait to see it as a first-time viewing for when we get there on the show. But yeah, I've always been told it has good action and it takes itself quite seriously despite it being a comedy. So I do look forward to that, and it does seem to be sort of the right thing to do. And also speaking of Ghosted, the other thing I was quite keen to just talk a little bit about with Garrett was Ana de Armas, because I mentioned in the review we were so close to getting that interview. It still stings my heart a little bit. So just to get a little bit closer to hearing what she was like on the set and just how prepared she was for it and how much she was up for sort of getting involved with the action. Because I think it shows, even if you look at some of the behind-the-scenes footage for No Time to Die, for instance, she, Anna, I should say, was shooting a lot of that stuff without even Daniel Craig being there just due to his injury. Did a lot of stuff with a stand-in.
Yeah.
She wanted that to work. She spent a lot of time training for that, and it shows because it is probably the best part of the entire film. And again, she's bringing that sort of action hero thing to the film. I dare say, I think she's one to watch in the future, despite already having quite a good career. But Ballerina we got coming up soon as well. It looks very bright for the sort of spy action genre when it comes to Ana de Armas.
Yeah, and I would be very curious to see if she crosses over into other franchises as well in the future, because that I think is something that very much could happen as well.
So you want her in Mission Impossible 8 is what you're saying?
It's too late for that one, I think. But you never know. You never know what the future could hold, right? And what other franchises will spring up that involve spies as well.
And speaking of Mission Impossible, Garrett also worked in Mission Impossible 3, a film that I'm sure we'll have in our sights in the next year or so.
Mm-hmm.
And just nice to hear a little bit about his thoughts on working with Tom on that film, and also just his favorite stunts in the Mission series. It's interesting that he had quite a few things to say about the motorcycle sequence in Dead Reckoning Part 1. But he has a lot of love for sort of the more physical stuff that Tom did. Say the jump in Fallout was the one he referred to on, which I think is the one he actually broke his ankle on.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And have you ever watched those YouTube videos, the Stuntmen React videos?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, where they will show, stuntmen
reacting.
Reacting to big sequences from big blockbuster movies involving stunts. And this was kind of like my own private version. I got to sit there and actually watch, Garrett break down these stunts in Mission Impossibles and talk about what he really was impressed with. It was a lot of fun, I got to be honest.
It really was. And speaking of a lot of fun, it looked like, and I haven't seen this film yet, it looked like you were having a lot of fun talking about Double Team.
Double Team is a movie that, like, my friend and I watched when we were teenagers and had the time of our lives with. And I saw it a few times. I know it doesn't necessarily have the best critical reputation, but it's a movie I hold in very fond regard. And I can't wait to cover it on the show. And to hear him talk about working with the tiger, I think anyone who saw Double Team remembers the tiger in that movie. And so that was such a fun story. And as he mentioned, like, that was earlier in his career. So, like, that's a real, like, trial by fire job fairly early into what will be a very long and very successful career.
Absolutely. And I haven't seen this bus sequence, but it sounds like he got pretty badly wrapped by that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's the thing about Double Team. Double Team has a lot of big stunts, a lot of big stunt moments that are very memorable.
I'm looking forward to looking at that one too. A lot of spy movies I haven't seen by the looks of it, and I call myself an expert. It's the worst, isn't it? It's the worst. But, I really do see this, as I said to Garrett, as a part one. This man has an extensive filmography. I would love to just chat Logan with him. The man did Logan. What a film. We've got a new Wolverine sort of film coming out in the next couple of years. It's all going on. And Avatar, there's a lot to talk about. So hopefully we'll have Garrett on once again for one of the films that we sort of brushed past that we haven't reviewed yet. So Spy or Double Team, Mission Impossible 3, something like that. We'll have him back for some more. But it was great to sort of get the behind the scenes view of Ghosted.
Definitely, yeah. I think, we were mixed on Ghosted. Like, it was kind of a back and forth in the review, but one thing I think we all agreed on was that the action was pretty darn impressive.
I mean, I would go far as to say I was surprised by Ghosted. I had
Sure.
rather low expectations and it exceeded them.
Yeah.
Which I think prompted this entire interview. So, thank you all for listening to our chat with Garrett Warren. Garrett, once again, thank you for joining us. But Cam, the question goes to you, sir. I think we may have a bit of a tonal whiplash once again on our hands. What's happening next week?
Scott, we are finishing up another franchise. We are going to bid adieu to the Cats and Dog series with a review of Cats and Dogs 2, The Revenge of Kitty Galore from 2010, and Cats and Dogs 3, Paws Unite from 2020.
Now, because of the magic of editing, Cam has removed the 3 takes it took him to say that intro there. And I do wonder if that is more to do with his disdain for the Cats and Dogs franchise. We'll find out next week.
You will find out. And I would say there was no disdain coming off of Cats and Dogs, the original. I guess all of you listeners will have to find out if I felt differently by the time I got to the ends of Cats and Dogs 3, Paws Unite.
Well, we know you're all howling for more Cats and Dogs content, and we thought it was best to bring him to a close. The third one has a bit of an interesting history, which we'll get into. But yeah, your mission, folks, should you choose to accept it, is to join us next week as we say goodbye to the Cats and Dogs franchise, as we review Cats and Dogs 2, The Revenge of Kitty Galore, and Cats and Dogs 3, Paws Unite, and find out if either of those 2 films make the knock list. If you like what you heard on this interview, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening and become a SpyHards diehard. If you do a written review, make sure you send it to us and we'll try our best to read it out on the show. If you don't already, make sure you follow us discreetly on social media at SpyHards. That's SpyHards on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Plus now we're on TikTok. Look us up there as well. But until next week, folks, I'm off to go and shoehorn a motorcycle jump into the next episode.